Welcome to the Holy Land Dispatch podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. The world can be a very surprising place to live in, but at times it's as predictable as a sunrise. I completely understand people being elated by the perceived end of the war in Gaza. I am very happy myself that we might be observing its end as we speak. I'm extremely happy and grateful that we have all of the living hostages back. I'm even cautiously happy with the prospect of some expansions to the Abraham Accords in our region. In the past couple of days, I've seen reactions to the Trump and Bibi plan to end the war and move towards building something positive in our region. Few of them unpredictable. There is a certain group of people, and it's not characterized by national or religious attributes necessarily, that simply refuses to recognize reality. It's what I'd call throughout the episode the both sides camp. The both sides camp was wrong before the war. It was wrong during the war, and it is still wrong now. And what do I mean by that? We're talking about a group of people, and quite frankly, what they might have in common is the fear to have an opinion. So when they want to share some thoughts about the conflict in the Middle East, it will always be presented as a both sides situation. For this camp, I'd like to share a few reminders and some insight, as they obviously don't want to trouble themselves with the pesky minutiae of the details involved. Part 1. The war didn't simply break out because both sides decided it was time to go to war, okay? Let's remember October 7th, 2023, even when we're over the moon about a ceasefire. Israel wasn't planning to send almost 1,000 soldiers to die just because we don't like Hamas. The war was instigated and opened by Hamas on October 7th, and there was a total of zero doubt in their minds about what was coming their way. It is mentioned in a document we will review later written by Yahya Sinwar before they attacked. Israel responded to the greatest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, so let's get our facts straight and not pretend there is a both sides story here. Part 2. Regardless of Israel's intent, or lack thereof, on October 6th, the war itself was not a both sides story either. Prior to the attack on October 7th, 2023, Yahya Sinwar shared clear directions to his people, detailing the goals and tactics of his terror attack. This document was written about a year prior to the attack, to give you some perspective of the premeditative nature of the atrocities. In his directives, which you can read about even in the New York Times, this arch-terrorist stated the following points. Deceptive movements in plain sight, so the IDF and Israel will believe it's just noise. Israel indeed was fooled. Our pre-October 7th conception was to look the other way in light of repeated provocation near the perimeter fence. After all, these were demonstrations, and those big tractors were there simply to build infrastructure. After breaching the fence, Sinwar envisioned waves of attacks, as was indeed the case on October 7th, against the kibbutzes near the Gaza Strip. Each attacking force had clear targets and goals. It included intelligence about civilians and military targets, although as we will see shortly, the military ones were just so they can get to the civilian. Sinwar highlighted the necessity to be as effective as possible in order to minimize Israel's response capabilities. Obviously, he knew it will indeed come. Now we get a glimpse of what we already knew, but is written in the document. Sinwar clearly identifies the psychological terror goals of the operation. He orders his forces to document via live feeds as they commit the atrocities, specifically in order to terrorize the hearts of Israeli public. He mentions the importance of sharing images that would incite other groups to join the attack. Just so his terrorist troops are clear on what he expects to see, he lists some desired images: stepping on IDF soldiers' heads, people being shot at zero range, slaughter of people with knives, explosions in tanks, burning of whole neighborhoods in the kibbutzes, etc. And his loyal troops complied, as we all know. On October 7th, Hamas started the war, yes, not a both-side situation at all, by brutally, mercilessly, premeditated attack on civilians. This was clear to anyone with some gray matter in their skull, and now it should also be clear to the both sides camp. In response, Israel attacked the terrorist organization in one of the most, if not the most, careful ways possible. You can listen to Major John Spencer, the world's leading urban warfare expert, if you don't want my word for it. The militant to civilian ratio, lowest among anything in recorded history. The IDF always announced its intentions in multiple ways, asking civilians to leave a zone under attack. Even though Hamas attacked those Arabs trying to leave, the IDF did what it could to intervene on the civilians' behalf. Israel allowed unprecedented amount of aid to go into the Strip, pretty much during the whole war, and even built alongside the US distribution centers to ensure the aid got to the right hands. Hamas did everything in its powers to maximize Arab casualties in order to sway international public opinion. So, no, dear both sides camp, the war was not fought the same on both sides. Hamas didn't actually fight as much as it did what it could to make sure Arabs died. The IDF did everything it could to avoid it. Those are simple facts that are backed by reality and self-admission by Hamas, and all the color commentary around it is plainly motivated by blind hate to Israel. Part 3. The two sides camp also celebrates what they call the prisoners exchange. I don't know how to break it to you folks, but you are, shall we say, distorting reality yet again. You know, after the Yom Kippur War, in which Israel, Egypt and Syria took soldiers captive during the fights, there were prisoner exchanges. Each army took some prisoners during the fights on the battlefield, and when the ceasefire was reached, they agreed to exchange those prisoners. What happened on October 7th was completely different. Yes, as part of the Trump-Bibi plan, the first step included the return of all Israeli hostages. Yes, the price for that was the release of many terrorists who were jailed in Israel. This was no prisoner exchange. This was Israel paying the ransom to free our hostages, nothing more. Young men and women who went to a music festival, elderly Holocaust survivors, and babies. These are the people who were kidnapped by Hamas. Kidnapped. The hundreds of prisoners that Israel released? They were arrested for horrendous acts of terror. Let's talk about just two of these prisoners who, in the eyes of the both sides camps, are somehow equivalent to the Israeli hostages. Raed Sheikh was a PA policeman. On October 12, 2000, this monster took part in one of the most atrocious acts of barbarism ever perpetuated against Israelis. He participated, in fact, was a central part of the lynch of 2 Israeli soldiers in Ramallah. These soldiers were beaten to death in the most horrific ways imaginable. Their bodies were mutilated, dragged in the street, tied to a car. Ismail Hamdan kidnapped a Jew near Jerusalem, in plain sight of the non-intervening PA policeman in the place, and murdered him. Every name in that list of prisoners that Israel released as ransom for the people Hamas kidnapped has a horrific crime attached to them. Those are people who murdered, kidnapped, raped and injured Israelis. So, no both side camp people. This was no both sides prisoner exchange. Get your facts straight. Part 4. One more thing we need to get straight is that following October 7th, polls in Gaza, as well as in Judea and Samaria, indicated roughly 80% support for Hamas and the attack they carried out on Israel. 80%. During the war, additional polls were carried out by Arab institutions, mind you, revealing a slight decrease. First to the 54 to 67% and more recently down to around 39%. Still, when asked about the contribution of the attacks to the Palestinian state awareness cause, about 80% still believe it brought them closer. Let's leave the fact that they were right for the time being. We've talked about the weaklings at the head of some Western states already. What these polls and others reveal is a simple sad reality. The Arabs in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria support Hamas. They were almost 100% behind them on the day they committed the atrocities. The fact that now, after 2 years of being on the receiving end of its consequences, they are far less happy? Well, that's just because they got those consequences. On October 7th, we saw them. On September 11th, 2001, we saw them. During the Gulf War, we saw them. The public in Gaza and the PA absolutely rejoice whenever Jews are killed, whenever the West is hit with the atrocities. And when the West strikes back, then they are sad. Well, they can't have it both ways. And the both sides camp can't either. The suffering on the Israeli side was definitely avoidable. All that needed to happen was for Hamas not to start a war. The suffering on the Gazan side was inevitable. Hamas declared it time and time again. Hamas demonstrated time and time again. They want to bring suffering to their people as part of the psychological warfare against Israel and indeed the West. Part 5. So now we have a plan, which first step is already being breached by Hamas as they drag their feet with the release of the remaining 28 hostages that were murdered. Let's for the moment assume that this is resolved with no further military involvement. Everyone is talking peace. I even mentioned it. But let's make a clear distinction here. I'm not talking about peace with Hamas. There is no peace with Hamas. There is only the removal of Hamas as a threat to Israel. When it comes to this murderer terrorist organization, there is no peace and never will be. It's either they go somewhere, drop their weapons and stop perpetrating attacks on Jews, or continuous war until it's defeated. There is zero moral equivalence between this barbaric terrorist organization and the Western democracy of Israel. No both sides. Unless you mean the side of evil, darkness and depravity as represented by Hamas, and the side of human liberties, liberalism and pluralism as represented by Israel. The peace I envision is not with the evil murderers of Hamas or the PLO. The peace I envision is with practical, pragmatic states in the region who want to build instead of fight, thrive instead of dedicating all resources to the destruction of Israel. I envision peace with people who can accept the reality that Israel is here to stay and want to make the best of the situation. With regards to the war in Gaza, I'm sorry, but I'm not happy for both sides. I'm happy for Israel. If and when such a miracle happens, and the people in the Strip or in the PA are no longer fully aligned with terrorist organizations, I'd be happy for them too. Until next time, thank you for joining the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. God bless.
Bye.